and welcome to STAR's Educational Shorts, where we will discuss important topics regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. At STAR, we believe that only through open-minded dialogue and education can we initiate a real change. My name is Vanessa, and I will be talking about systemic racism. Systemic racism occurs when systems and structures have procedures or processes that disadvantage people of color. Systemic racism occurs in many types of institutions and leads to unequal and unjust treatment for people of color. Here are just a few examples. Systemic racism has contaminated every step of the legal process. A black person has a much higher chance of being arrested, of being convicted, and of receiving a serious prison sentence for any given crime. Black Americans and white Americans use drugs at a similar rate, but black Americans are 6 times more likely to be arrested for it. On average, black men in the U.S. receive sentences that are 19.1% longer than those of white men convicted for the same crimes. Health insurance also heavily favors rich white citizens. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience a pregnancy-related death than white women, even at similar levels of income and education. Because of the lack of high-quality options, black babies die at a staggering rate, almost 2.5 times more often than white babies. Systemic racism has a major effect on the educational system in the United States. A black student is far more likely to be suspended from school than a white peer. This stretches from preschool through the end of high school. During the 2015 to 2016 school year, black students represented only 15% of total U.S. student enrollment, but they made up 35% of students suspended once, 44% of students suspended more than once, and 36% of students expelled. The U.S. Department of Education concluded that this disparity is not explained by more frequent or more serious misbehavior by students of color. Black unemployment is usually twice as high as white unemployment. This goes for people with a wide range of educational levels, as even black Americans with college degrees struggle to get hired. Talking about racism is not an attempt to guilt or shame anyone. It is about spreading awareness so that it can be properly addressed. Evoking change is a long process, but learning more about systemic racism is an important first step. Systemic racism can go unnoticed by white people because they're not looking for it. But the reality is that white people have benefited from systemic racism. If we are to move forward to a more inclusive and just society, we must work to understand and recognize the racism that people of color face every day, and the enormous unwarranted benefits of white privilege.
To make our communities as best as they can be, we need to first acknowledge those systemic faults. Learning about systemic racism as a part of our education is essential, because without learning about it, you don't know that it's there, and that does the most damage, because then you're solely operating from a point of privilege.
The problems that people are facing because of systemic racism, they're not addressed, and so it's kind of hard to overcome them.
We just bring awareness and hopefully help the issue. But even in school, a lot of things about race are sugar-coated and not taught the way they should.
It needs to be something that people actively know about, and they don't just let it go by unnoticed or be complacent. Especially the worst kind of ignorance is when you don't even know it exists.
It helps you understand why things are the way they are and not just make your own assumptions that, oh, these people don't work hard enough or they don't try hard enough, but that there are systemically things against them that will keep them back even if they do try.
As someone of color who is growing up, you see that something that is affecting me, whether that is implicit biases or microaggressions, that can lower my ability to access some opportunities. And I think that if I continue to see that as I grow up, I kind of am growing up in a broken system that isn't benefiting me.
Systemic racism is one of those things that requires a lot of group effort because it's systemic, it's something in the form of a long-standing structure.
You can always trace it back to aspects of our history. And so when realizing that there is a great marginalization within that history, it can allow us to move forward and understand the areas that we really need to focus on as young change makers.
When we stand together against racism, we stay together. Thanks for listening.